Hazrat Khalid bin Walid, R.A., was one of the greatest warriors in Islamic history. Before his unsheathed sword, the superpowers of that era, the Persian and Roman empires, were forced to their knees. Khalid's presence on the battlefield could shift the tide and outcome of a war at any moment. With his military brilliance, tactical genius, strength, courage, speed, and agility, he was an invincible warrior. The Prophet of Allah, PBUH, himself bestowed upon him the title Saifullah, meaning the Sword of Allah. Based on the book, The Sword of Allah, by the renowned Pakistani military researcher A.I. Akram, we are narrating the life story of the great Khalid in a series. The Sword of Allah, Episode 17, The River of Blood. Hormuz informed the Persian emperor of the Muslim army's advance from Yamama. Upon hearing this, the emperor ordered the formation of a new army in Ctesiphon, placing it under the command of a first-class general named Karen bin Kiryana. Karen was also a 100,000 dirham general. The emperor ordered Karen to march toward Uballa to reinforce Hormuz's strength, and Karen left Ctesiphon for this purpose. Advancing along the left bank of the Tigris River, Karen reached Mazar, crossed the river, and continued south along the right bank until he reached the banks of the Makil River. Just as he crossed the Makil near the junction of the two rivers, he received news of Hormuz's disaster at Kazima. Shortly after, the fleeing soldiers of the Persian army from the Battle of Chains, led by Qubaz and Anushjan, joined Karen. Among these fugitives were the Arab allies of the Persian army, and naturally they began blaming each other for the defeat. Although their morale was not as high as before, they remained brave warriors, and their anger outweighed their fear of defeat. Qubaz and Anushjan were eager to face the Muslim army again. They alone, with Karen, found it hard to believe that uncivilized nomadic Arabs could defeat a well-equipped regular army in battle. They failed to realize that their opponents at Kazima were not barbarians, but a new force empowered by a new faith. Regardless, Karen did not think it wise to advance further, leaving the south bank of the Makil River behind. By keeping the river at his back, he wouldn't have to worry about his rear. He wanted to force a frontal confrontation, limiting the opponent's maneuvering space, as his army's training and skills were of a very high standard. Muthanna, with his light cavalry, continued to pursue the fleeing remnants of the defeated Persian army from Uballa. He encountered them on the banks of the Makil River. Despite knowing of the Muslim army's presence, the Persian forces refrained from leaving their camp to engage. Muthanna scouted the area and sent word to Khalid R.A. that he was facing a massive Persian force on the south bank of the Makil River. Since this battle took place on the riverbank, it became known as the Battle of the River. Meanwhile, leaving Kazima, Khalid R.A. continued his northward advance and arrived at a place called Zubair, 100 miles southwest of Uballa. Considering there were no enemy troops in Uballa, he decided not to enter. While at Zubair, he learned from Muthanna's messenger of the combined assembly of the fugitives from Kazima and Karen's army. Khalid R.A. was eager to destroy this newly formed Persian force while the impact of the defeat at Kazima was still in their minds. He sent a small detachment under Makil bin Makarin to Uballa to collect abandoned Persian supplies and led the main force toward the Makil River. He joined Muthanna in the third week of April 633 A.D. Khalid R.A. personally inspected the entire area. Since the Persian army was positioned with the river at their back, Khalid had little opportunity to maneuver or launch attacks from the flanks or rear. The tactics he used against Hormuz were not applicable here. Having no other alternative, he formulated a plan for a standard frontal assault mirroring the Persian formation. The two armies stood face to face. Karen took overall command, standing at the center, while the wing commands were given to Qubaz and Anushjan. The Arab allies of the Persians were also deployed in various sections. Karen was a brave and cunning general. He positioned his troops very close to the river and even kept a fleet of boats ready for use if necessary.
Khalid deployed his troops in a center and two wings, appointing Asim bin Amr and Adi bin Hatim as the wing commanders. The battle began with 3 duels. The first challenge came from Karan. Before Khalid could move forward from his horse, a Muslim warrior named Makil bin al-Ashi stepped forward to accept Karan's challenge. Since Makil was a skilled swordsman, Khalid did not call him back. Makil managed to kill Karan quite easily. Immediately after this, the wing commanders Qubaz and Anushjan stepped forward and called for duels. The 2 Muslim wing commanders accepted the challenge. Asim killed Anushjan, and Adi killed Qubaz. After the 3 Persian commanders were slain, Khalid ordered a general attack, and the Muslims swiftly charged the Persian lines. In those days, the personal success or failure of commanders deeply influenced the soldiers. Despite losing their leaders, the Persians fought bravely for a while. However, due to lack of leadership, chaos soon spread. Under the continuous pressure of the Muslim army, they lost all coordination and fled toward the river. This unorganized retreat turned into a chaotic rout. The lightly equipped, fast-moving Muslim army easily caught up with the heavily armed Persian soldiers. Persians tumbled into boats in groups to save their lives. But before they could board, the Muslims managed to kill thousands of enemy soldiers. Many who made it onto the boats escaped. In their survival, they felt grateful to Karan, for if he hadn't cleverly kept those boats, not a single man would have survived. Since the Muslim army had no way to cross the river, they were forced to stop their pursuit.
According to Tabari, 30,000 Persian soldiers were killed in this battle. More enemy wealth was captured here than at Kazima. Once again, Khalid quickly distributed 4/5 of the spoils among the soldiers and sent the remaining 1/5 to the Caliph in Medina. Khalid then focused on consolidating the administration of the conquered area. The local inhabitants pledged loyalty and agreed to pay jizya in exchange for security. Establishing headquarters at Hufeh, Khalid stationed a team under Subit bin Muqarrin for tax collection. While Khalid was busy with administrative tasks, some of his men crossed the Makil and Euphrates to catch Karin's fleeing soldiers, while others moved along the Euphrates toward Hira to gather news of any further movements by Emperor Khosrow's forces. News of the disaster at Makil spread through Ctesiphon like wildfire. A second Persian army had been crushed by the inhabitants of the barren desert. Moreover, these 2 armies were commanded by 2 famous generals who wore 100K dirham caps. Besides them, several other top-tier generals were killed. It was unbelievable to them, as this new enemy was unknown to the Persians. The complete defeat of 2 well-equipped, massive Persian armies in consecutive battles seemed like a dream. Emperor Ardashir was not ready to give any more chances. He ordered the formation of 2 more armies on the very day the Battle of the River took place. Readers might wonder how the emperor, 300 miles away in Ctesiphon, knew the outcome on the same day. A notable aspect of the Persian emperor's war preparations was the communication system. Before a battle, numerous men with loud voices were stationed in a line at specific distances from the battlefield to the capital. Every event on the battlefield would be shouted by the first person to the second to the third, and so on. In this way, the emperor could receive news very quickly. Upon the emperor's order, Persian warriors began gathering in the capital. Except for those stationed on the Roman border in the west, warriors from every city and fort assembled. Within a few days, the first army was ready. The Persians anticipated that the Muslim army would advance toward northwest Iraq along the Euphrates. Based on this, the emperor decided to block Khalid's path at a place called Walaja and destroy his army. The first of the newly formed Persian armies was placed under the command of Andarsgard. He was the military governor of the frontier province of Khorasan and a very famous warrior in the eyes of the Persians and Iraqi Arabs. Born into a Persian family but raised among Iraqi Arabs, he had excellent relations with them. Andarsgard was ordered to march toward Walaja and was told that a second, newly formed army would soon join him. He left Ctesiphon, moved along the east bank of the Tigris, and crossed the river at Kaskar. He moved southwest, crossed the Euphrates near Walaja, and set up camp. Before leaving the capital, he sent messengers to various Arab tribes he knew, calling them to join the war. Thousands of Arab warriors gathered under his banner along the way. The remnants of Qarin's army also joined him. Reaching Walaja, he was delighted by the massive size of his force. He waited for the second Persian army, led by Bahman, which was supposed to join him shortly. Bahman was a top-tier military figure and a 100K Durham general. When the second army was ready, the emperor ordered him to head toward Walaja to meet Andarsgard. The emperor placed both armies under Bahman's overall command, hoping that the combined strength of these massive forces would finish the Muslim power forever. Bahman took a different route than Andarsgard. He moved south from Ctesiphon through the area between the two rivers, heading straight for Walaja. His army started several days after the first one and moved at a slower pace. The Muslim victory at the Battle of the River was an unprecedented event. At the cost of minimal casualties, they had crushed a massive Persian army and seized enormous wealth. However, this battle gave Khalid cause for reflection. Despite defeating two large Persian armies in two battles, he was still on the fringes of the Persian Empire. The Persians could field many more such armies if needed. He was overwhelmed by the thought of the Persian Empire's vast resources. Khalid was the first Muslim commander to lead campaigns to conquer lands outside Arabia. He was not just a military commander, but also responsible for governing conquered lands on behalf of the Caliph. He had no experienced person with him to consult on military or administrative matters. Furthermore, his men were now exhausted. They had traveled long distances, endured hunger, and fought for their lives against enemies several times their strength. Under these circumstances, Khalid allowed the Muslim army to rest for a few days.
Meanwhile, Khalid, SAWA, developed an efficient intelligence network. These spies were local Arabs who, impressed by Khalid's personal conduct, had become loyal to him. On the other hand, they were fed up with the imperialistic attitude and harsh behavior of the Persians. They tied their fate to the Muslim army and kept Khalid informed of all Persian movements. They reported Andarzagar's departure from Ctesiphon with a massive force, the joining of Arab contingents and Qarin's remnants, and his march toward Walaja. They also told Khalid SAWA that the emperor's second army, led by Bahman, had left Ctesiphon and was moving south. Gradually, Khalid learned that within a short time, two Persian armies would unite to block his path south of the Euphrates, or advance to attack him in the Uballa area. The strength and number of Persian soldiers would be so high that the chances of Khalid SAWA successfully countering them were very slim. To achieve his goal, Khalid SAWA had to reach Hira, which meant overcoming the obstacle at Walaja. The fact that many Persian soldiers fled the battlefield also concerned Khalid. They would flee one battlefield only to join the next army. Fugitives from Kazima joined Qarin, and those from Qarin's army were now joining Andarzagar. To truly defeat the Persian power, this escape route had to be closed. These were the two main problems facing Khalid. The first was strategic. The two newly formed Persian armies would soon unite. He found a fitting solution: advance rapidly and destroy Andarzagar's army before Bahman could join him. The second was tactical: how to prevent the enemy from fleeing so they couldn't participate in the next battle. He found a brilliant solution to this as well, something only a genius general like Khalid could conceive. We will discuss this later.
Khalid Sawa instructed Subayt bin Mukharan to oversee the administration of the conquered districts and to station guards to watch the lower Tigris so that any new enemy arriving from the north or east could be reported immediately. With the remaining group of about 15,000 soldiers, he marched rapidly along the edge of the Great Marsh toward Hira. If given the chance, Andarzaghar would undoubtedly have waited for Bahman's army before engaging in the final battle, but he wasn't given that chance. Several days before Bahman's expected arrival, the Muslim army appeared on the eastern horizon and camped near Walaja. Of course, Andarzaghar wasn't particularly worried. With a massive army under his command, he was certain of victory. He didn't even feel the need to secure his rear by positioning his force just a mile back by the riverbank. The next day, both armies observed each other from their positions. Commanders and officers inspected the area and planned for the coming day. The next morning, both armies deployed on the battlefield in a standard formation, a center and two wings. Once again, command of the Muslim wings was given to Asim bin Amr and Adi bin Hatim. Andarzaghar was surprised by the small number of Muslim soldiers. He estimated they wouldn't exceed 10,000, yet the stories he had heard led him to believe Khalid's army was massive. Even the number of Muslim cavalry didn't seem significant to him. Most were infantry. It is likely that the fleeing Persian soldiers from Kazima and the river battle had exaggerated Khalid's army. Andarzaghar didn't know that the Muslim soldiers standing before him were also slightly surprised, wondering why their numbers seemed fewer than the day before. However, they weren't too concerned, for the sword of Allah knew best. Seeing the situation, Andarzaghar's morale skyrocketed. He was determined to wipe out the small Muslim force and free Iraq from the rebellious desert dwellers. He waited for the Muslim attack. He planned to let them attack first, tire them out, and then destroy them with a massive counterattack. When Khalid Sawa launched a simultaneous attack with his force, Andarzaghar was thrilled because that was exactly what he wanted. The two armies engaged with great determination and bravery. The incredibly courageous Muslim army struck the well-equipped opponents with great skill. However, the Persian army was also able to repel every blow firmly. After about an hour of fighting, both sides began to feel fatigued, especially the Muslims, since each one of them had to fight several opponents. Furthermore, the Persians replaced their front-line soldiers with reserves. Khalid's exemplary leadership and skill helped maintain the Muslim morale. He fought bravely at the front lines. During the first phase of the battle, a duel between Khalid and a giant Persian warrior energized the Muslim army. Due to his massive size and immense strength, he was called Hazar Mard, as it was believed he could do the work of 1,000 warriors. When this giant warrior stepped forward and threw a challenge, Khalid accepted it. After a few minutes of fighting, Khalid found an opening and killed him with his sword. As the lifeless body hit the ground, Khalid sat on the giant's chest and calmly finished his lunch.
The second phase of the battle began with a Persian counterattack. With his experienced eyes, Andarzaghar saw signs of exhaustion on the faces of the Muslim warriors. He considered this the perfect time to strike back. His assessment was correct. At his command, the Persian army advanced simultaneously and dealt a massive blow to the Muslims. Although the Muslim army managed to withstand the blow for a while, it created unbearable pressure on their nerves and limbs. They began to retreat slowly, though they maintained battle discipline. This only increased the intensity of the Persian attack. The Muslims kept looking toward Khalid, R.A., hoping for a change in the plan or some signal that would bring relief. But there was no such signal from Khalid, R.A. Instead, he continued to fight like a lion and expected the same from his comrades, and his soldiers did exactly that. Although the Persians were paying a very high price to advance, they were ecstatic with the joy of potential victory. Andarzaghar was also jubilant. Victory was almost within his grasp.
He hadn't yet reached the highest tier of Persian social status, but now he could clearly see a 100K dirham cap right in front of him. The Muslims were fighting with a desperation of cornered animals, risking everything in a reckless struggle. They had reached the very edge of human endurance. Many began to think if only Khalid would engage the opposing commander in a duel to end this. The situation was so dire that even a slight increase in Persian pressure threatened to shatter the Muslim defense into 1,000 pieces. At that critical moment, Khalid R.A. gave a signal. No one initially understood its meaning, but those for whom it was intended sprang into action. Within moments, 2 lines of cavalry appeared along the ridgeline of the hills behind the Persian army, one line from the rear left and the other from the rear right. With the thunderous cry of Allahu Akbar, the Muslim cavalry charged the Persians from behind. The hooves of the Arabian horses made the plains of Walaja tremble. The Persians' joy of a potential victory instantly turned into paralyzing fear. Those who were cheering moments ago were now screaming in terror as they were struck by the sudden rear assault. Khalid, leading the main force with renewed energy, linked up with the 2 cavalry wings attacking from behind. The Persian army was completely encircled. Andarzagar's forces were caught in a trap from which there was no escape. Realizing the horror of the situation, the disciplined Persian army dissolved into a chaotic mob. Soldiers turning back were met with spears and swords. Those moving forward were cut down by daggers and blades. Pressed from all sides, they lost all sense of direction. The encirclement became so tight that there was no room to swing a weapon or even move to evade a blow. Those who wanted to fight didn't know whom to strike, and those who wanted to flee didn't know where to run. In their desperation to escape the death trap, they trampled over one another, essentially fighting themselves. The Walaja battlefield became a living hell for Andarzagar's army. As the intensity of the Muslim attack increased from every direction, the human circle tightened with the strength of steel. The helplessness of the Persians made the Muslims even more aggressive, and they vowed not to let a single enemy escape. They largely succeeded. Only a few thousand Persians managed to survive, as it is rare in military history for an entire massive force to be completely annihilated. Overall, however, Andarzagar's army ceased to exist. It was as if a massive chasm had opened beneath their feet and swallowed them whole. While Hormuz and Karan's armies had been defeated, Andarzagar's force was utterly liquidated. Andarzagar himself managed to flee, but he ran blindly into the desert. In his frantic attempt to put distance between himself and the hell of Walaja, he lost his way and eventually died of agonizing thirst in the heart of the desert. After the battle, Khalid R.A. gathered his exhausted warriors. He realized the immense toll this battle, the most brutal of the 3 fought in Iraq so far, had taken on everyone. He wanted to ensure that the memory of successive battles didn't blunt their morale, as even greater challenges lay ahead. Khalid addressed his men, beginning with the praise of Allah and blessings on the Prophet, peace be upon him. Do you not see the abundance of wealth in this Persian land? Do you not remember the poverty of the Arabian lands? Do you not see how the crops cover this earth? If it were not for the will of Allah, could we have subdued this rich land to conquer the hunger of our gray deserts with this abundance of food? The Muslim warriors stood in total agreement with Khalid. The strategy behind the victory. The day before the Battle of Walaja, Khalid R.A. had spoken with 2 officers, Bishr bin Abi Rum and Sa'id bin Murrah. He placed 2 fast-moving cavalry units of about 2,000 or more under their command with specific instructions. They were to take their units under the cover of night and circle far around the southern side of the Persian camp. They were to hide behind the hills in the Persian rear, remaining ready to move at a moment's notice. Once the battle began in the morning, they were to wait behind the ridgeline, using scouts to watch for Khalid's signal. Upon receiving the signal, both units were to launch a sudden, crushing blow to the Persian rear and flanks. This plan was executed perfectly, without any misunderstanding. It was kept in total secrecy, known only to those involved. In the morning, when these cavalry units were nowhere to be seen, Khalid faced the massive Persian force with his remaining 10,000 warriors. This was the plan for the Battle of Walid, fought in early May 633 AD. Khalid used the tactic of pinning the enemy down with a frontal assault before launching a powerful pincer movement from the rear. This exact maneuver was famously used by Hannibal at the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC. Khalid, R.A., however, had never heard of Hannibal. This brilliant strategy was entirely his own. The Battle of Ulais, the River of Blood. Despite 3 bloody victories, Khalid knew obstacles remained before reaching his target, Hira. It was unlikely the proud Persians would simply give way. More blood was yet to be spilled. Despite Khalid's efforts, a few thousand enemies had escaped Walid. These were primarily Arab Christians from the Bani Bakr tribe, Muthana's own kinsmen, who had clung to Christianity instead of Islam. Most lived in Iraq as subjects of the Persian emperor. They had answered Andarzagad's call, and after fleeing Walid, crossed the Casif River and took refuge in Ulais, 10 miles away. They felt safe there, protected by the Euphrates on one side and the Casif on the other, meaning they could only be attacked from the southeast. Khalid gave his exhausted army a few days' rest while he managed the spoils and prepared to move. He anticipated another bloody battle before Hira because Bahman's army was still active. He ordered the Muslim detachment guarding the lower Tigris to join him. Although his spies reported the enemy at Ulais, Khalid didn't initially see them as a major threat and didn't want to exhaust his men further by chasing fugitives. However, 10 days later, reports of a massive enemy buildup at Ulais made it clear a major battle was coming. Once the Tigris detachment joined, Khalid marched from Walid with 18,000 Muslim soldiers. With no alternative route, he crossed the Casif River for a direct frontal assault. The consecutive defeats had shaken the Persian Empire to its core. The Persians began to suspect that some invisible power was aiding this unstoppable Islamic force. To be defeated by desert dwellers they had always looked down upon was deeply embarrassing. In its 1,200-year history, Persia had never faced such humiliations, especially so close to its seat of power. For the first time, they were forced to change their opinion of the Arabs. It was clear that Islam had transformed a backward, disorganized people into a powerful, disciplined, and victorious force. They also realized Khalid possessed a genius that acted as a force multiplier. His name began to be whispered with both awe and terror. However, a superpower like Persia doesn't collapse after 3 battles. They were a nation of conquerors who had risen from defeat before. The gloom in Ctesiphon soon turned into a grim resolve to drive the invaders back into the desert. Representatives from the Bani Bakr tribe met the emperor, requesting aid and rallying thousands of Arab Christians from Ulais and Hira. They were prepared for a fight to the death. The emperor promised help and sent word to Bahman. Bahman, hearing of the Walid disaster, had halted his advance on the north bank of the Euphrates. He was ordered to lead the combined forces at Ulais. Bahman didn't go to Ulais himself. He sent his senior general, Jaban, with instructions to avoid battle until Bahman arrived. Bahman returned to Ctesiphon, likely to consult the emperor, whom he found terminally ill. Meanwhile, at Ulais, Jaban found a massive gathering of Arab Christians led by a chief named Abdul Aswad, whose 2 sons had been killed at Walid and was hungry for revenge. the Persians and Arabs positioned themselves with the Euphrates on their left and the Casif on their right.
Muthanna, with his light cavalry, scouted the position and informed Khalid. Khalid accelerated his march, hoping to strike the Arab Christians before the Persians arrived, but Jaban had reached Ulis just hours before him. Khalid was now facing a massive combined force. He decided to strike immediately to prevent the enemy from coordinating. It was mid-May, 633 AD. Khalid appointed Adi bin Hatim and Asim bin Amr as wing commanders and launched a direct assault, as the terrain left no room for flanking maneuvers. Victory depended entirely on the speed and intensity of the attack. Jaban was caught off guard. News of the Muslim arrival reached him at noon while the Persian soldiers were preparing lunch. Unlike the Arabs, the Persians preferred hot meals and refused to fight on empty stomachs. Jaban, seeing the Muslims advancing, warned his men, but they ignored him, insisting on eating first. They spread cloths on the ground and sat down. However, the Christian Arabs were already in battle formation. Before the Persians could take more than a few bites, they realized the Muslim attack was imminent. They abandoned their food and rushed to join the ranks. Jaban deployed the Arab Christians on the wings under Abd al-Aswad and Abjar, while the Persians held the center. The battle was extremely fierce. Walaja had been brutal, but Ulis was even worse. Khalid never forgot this battle. While specific tactical details are sparse, it is known that Khalid R.A. killed the Arab commander, Abd al-Aswad, in a duel. The emperor's army fought with everything they had, and the Christian Arabs fought to the death, knowing that defeat meant the fall of Hira. The battle raged for 2 hours with incredible intensity, especially near the riverbank, where thousands of Persians fell. Exhausted and seeing no sign of the enemy retreating, Khalid R.A. raised his hands to Allah. "O Allah, grant us victory. I vow that if you grant us victory, I shall let their blood flow in this river." When the Muslims launched a fresh assault, Allah granted them victory. By early afternoon, the Persians broke and fled. Thousands were killed, and the sands of the dry riverbed turned red. Khalid ordered his cavalry, "Do not kill them, bring them back alive." To fulfill his vow, the captured soldiers were brought to the riverbed and executed so their blood would flow. This continued through the night and into the following days. On the third day, a companion named Kaka said to Khalid, "Even if you killed everyone on earth, blood will not flow in this dry river unless you open the dam upstream. Let the water in, and it will carry the blood." Khalid ordered the dam opened. As the water rushed in, it turned deep red with the blood of the fallen. This is how it became known as the River of Blood. After the battle, the hungry Muslims ate the hot meals the Persians had prepared. According to Tabari, 70,000 Persians and Arab Christians were killed in this battle, though Jaban escaped. The next day, Khalid signed a treaty with the locals. They would pay jizya for protection and serve as spies and guides for the Muslims. Reflective on the battle later, Khalid R.A. told his friends, "At the Battle of Mu'tah, I broke 9 swords in my hand. But I have never faced a force as strong as the Persians, and among the Persians I have never faced a fight like the one at Ulis." This quote from a master general like Khalid highlights the sheer might of the Persian military. But in Ctesiphon, the mood was different. Emperor Ardashir lay on his deathbed, unable to send any more armies against the sword of Allah. From the fields of Ulis came the final swan song of the grandson of the great Anushirwan.